What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Dose with Dylan Davis. As always, I am your host, Dylan. You can follow me on Twitter at DylanJD98. And today we have a packed crew with me and on your stream through YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter here on the Painted Lines Network. You can like this video, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the Painted Lines YouTube channel if you are new to the channel, or follow the Painted Lines on Twitter at the Painted Lines. I am with my guy, Matt McGinty, my guy, Scotty. You know him from Mondays with Scotty here on the Daily Dose, and one of my co-hosts from the Faithful Fanatics, George Ryder. You can go give him a follow at _George Ryder. And today is a special edition of the Daily Dose with Sixers insider Paul Hudrick will be joining us in just about 10 minutes to discuss everything around the current state of our Philadelphia 76ers. Fellas, how are we feeling? I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but the sky is apparently falling again. A loss without Joel Embiid to a good Western Conference contender means that we're done. We're cooked. So how are we feeling today?
Good.
I love the energy today, fellas.
We looked terrible yesterday. There's no way to put it. The sky's not falling, though, obviously. But
I feel the same as I did 2-3 days ago.
Yeah.
That's the perfect way to put it. Oh, idiot. Before we get started here on the Daily Dose, we have a message from our sponsor at XL Media at the Painted Lines.
Hey, what's up, guys? March Madness is here. The NBA and NHL are both in full swing. Baseball opening day is coming up, while we here at the Painted Lines are devoted to bringing you top-notch content from all the major sports. We are excited to also now give you the opportunity to cash in on all that content and knowledge. If you follow the link below, you will have the opportunity to sign up with BetRivers, an online sportsbook, and get an instant new user deposit match of up to $250. That's free money that you can use and try to turn into more free money. Let's go. Don't sit there and waste all that money. Turn every basket into an otherwise meaningless Cavs-Timberwolves matchup on a random Wednesday in March. That makes it all the more exciting. For betting tips and advice, be sure to check out written content from our top prognosticator, Money Max, on our website at thepaintedlines.com, or check out the Tough Cover podcast right here on the Painted Lines YouTube channel. You've seen the commercials all over TV and radio, but now is the time. Sign up today with BetRivers using the link below and start cashing in on your love for sports. Using the link below will automatically inform BetRivers that TPL sent you, and you'll get that new user deposit match of up to $250. Don't miss out on this opportunity for some free money, baby.
There you go, guys.
Free money.
Free money here at the Painted Lines. Use that link in the YouTube description, and they will be notified that TPL sent you, and you will be able to use the promo. Abe says, fellas, what's going on? Abe, Sixers insider Paul Hudrick is joining us in a few minutes. Let's see here. Tough loss. Wish we saw more heart from Ben and the crew, even though we weren't favorites last night. Look, here's the way I'll look at it. Some people are talking about their heart, kind of not their character, but just that they didn't show up or whatever. He looked disinterested. I know some people are saying, like, Ben, from the first few minutes, Ben couldn't get anything going offensively, so he just gave up. He didn't try. Here's what I'll say, guys. How do you take the sails out of a team that is missing the MVP of the league and is on their fifth straight road game, fourth straight on the West Coast? You drop 44 with 7 threes and about 70% shooting in the first quarter. That's a good way to do it. So, yeah, the Sixers' sails were taken out in the first quarter. Their defense definitely weathered the storm after that and, played a lot better. But it was just too much to overcome at that point. Scott, you said it before the show started. It's like they got hit in the first round of a fight and, it took them forever to recover from that hit. They got punched in the mouth early and it was just too much to overcome. That's flat out. And one thing that Scott and I talked about, Git and I have said before on the show with Doc Rivers, George, you as well, one thing Doc knows how to do is lose in this league. He's openly said it. Sometimes you need to know when it's not your night and you got to lose, and you got to know how to lose. Ben Simmons played 25 minutes. Tobias Harris played 26 minutes. They didn't play the entire fourth quarter. You think Doc knew how to lose last night? Yeah, he did. He said, "Get me back on the East Coast," and we're one game away from getting the MVP back together. So, Gint, I know your feelings about this game. George, I'll start with you. It's been a while. Just talk to me about last night. How are you feeling? Are you, you said the sky's not falling. You feel the same, but are you frustrated with Ben and the team's effort last night, as some people are? Or are you just like, you know what, man, I kind of expected it. I was chalking it up as a loss anyway.
I think people are overreacting. Like, I still feel the same about this team as I did coming into this weekend. Does Ben need to play better? Yeah, it definitely needs to play better. But all in all, there's really no need to overreact about anything. The sky's not falling in Philadelphia. Joel Embiid's coming back hopefully this weekend, and everything's going to be back to the way it was with the MVP. I mean, we were winning a lot of games without the MVP. We go on a road trip, we drop some, we don't look good last night, and all of a sudden, like, this team sucks. This team's going to look terrible the rest of the way out. Like, no, there's no need to overreact. Ben definitely does need to play better. The criticism is a lot, but I guess it's warranted. It's fine. This is Philadelphia. And with Joe coming back, I don't see how anybody thinks the sky's falling. Twitter was pretty angry last night.
Twitter was furious last night.
So, like, I still feel the same as I did 3 days ago. I don't feel any different.
See, that's part of the issue. And Scott, I'll throw this to you. And, you mentioned how the Clippers and Denver on social media are, true contenders in the Western Conference. And I completely agree with you. And that's where this fan base, like, I've tried to discuss it with people before the shows. Like, you got to try to keep a level head. Like, remember when we were talking about going 5-4, 6-3, people were like 8-1, set like whatever, like going like that. Someone said they're going to blow out Denver yesterday. Denver's not as good as we thought. That's because they play well against, middle of the pack teams without Embiid, as, I was excited for. But then you get to true contenders in the Western Conference. You're on a West Coast trip. You're missing Joel. And, everyone kind of expects them to keep rolling. Well, you got to have a level head. So, Scott, were you surprised at all with how last night played out? And what is your message to just, the Sixers fan base that, they've lost 2 in a row. That's it, guys.
Yeah. What I would simply say, I mean, you guys have hit a lot of the points already. Last couple of games of the road trip, you're playing the best teams that you played on the road trip. They obviously came out. They got punched in the mouth. The Denver Nuggets hit a massive amount of threes. Michael Porter Jr. was hot. Jamal Murray was hot. It seemed like everybody was hot at the beginning. And it took the Sixers a little while to settle down and actually get to playing their game. I think what else we need to understand with Ben Simmons, especially in a game like last night, is when all of these threes are raining down, Ben Simmons does not fit in that scoring category. So when you get down by 22 points, you need to hit a couple threes. He's going to be a little more passive to shooters. So I think that's something we have to take into account as well, is that once a team gets such big a lead, Ben Simmons scoring becomes less of a priority in reality because he's not shooting from the outside. And at that point, they needed to score, and they needed to score fast to catch up. So I know Ben has been turning the ball over. That's something that needs to change. And we saw the intensity last night. There was a lack. Once again, they're tired. But I do think we just need to understand that the Nuggets and the Clippers are legit contenders. The Nuggets looked even better than what I thought they would look. They looked really unstoppable in all reality because Jokic didn't even really go to work. He had 21 points. He's a guy that can go out and get 30 points any night. Jamal Murray doesn't miss shots. He makes everything. Literally, the spin that he puts on his layups are ridiculous. It's very like Kyrie Irving, like his finishing ability in the paint. And then Michael Porter Jr., we know the story with that, right? Sixers could have had him. And look what this guy does. He does exactly what we need, knocks down open shots. So that team looks really good. Aaron Gordon, a guy that they just picked up, hasn't even gotten situated yet. He didn't even have like a true impact on the game last night. So we just got to accept that these guys in the West are legit contenders. You're playing competition, and that's what happens without your star. You didn't have a guy that could come back and score.
Yeah, Gint reminds me every time MPJ or Mikal Bridges has a big game that the Sixers could have and should have had them. But here's our guest for today's show. He is a Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN. He's also the host of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. His name is Paul Hudrick. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul Hudrick. And he is also a huge Batman fan. So, Paul, thank you for joining the show. And I don't know if you noticed this, but the Sixers Twitter sky is falling yet again.
Yes, as it often does after a loss. To me, if you're over-examining this loss, like you got to find something better to do. Like, this is things that happen in an NBA season. It's a long road trip in Denver, and I know people don't like it when you hear the altitude thing, but the altitude thing is real. I've talked to NBA players who say it is very real. It takes you a quarter or even two possibly to get your wind and to get acclimated to it. So that's not some kind of excuse or like something like a myth. That's a real thing that athletes go through it when they're playing in high altitude. Listen, it was bad. It was a bad game to watch. I did not enjoy having to spend my night watching it. That first quarter was brutal. One of the worst first quarters they played all season, arguably the worst quarter they played all season. But yeah, I mean, it's just so many factors as to why it was bad. And listen, nobody was good. I can't really point to a single player on the roster and say, hey, this guy had a good game. I mean, they were all bad. It was a bad game. Those things happen in a long season. And yeah, I mean, I think if you're acting like the sky is falling when they're 3-2 on this road trip without Joel Embiid with a legitimate chance to go 4-2 on Thursday, I mean, that's what you got to look at. You got to look at the big picture. You can't just focus on a Tuesday night game in Denver at the end of a road trip at the end of March. So, yeah, I think everyone's got to take a deep breath, just have perspective and kind of look at the whole big picture here.
Yeah. So Honest Abe says, big fan of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. Keep up the good work. So, Paul, last night's game is kind of on the back burner for me as well. But I want to get your thoughts first and foremost on last Thursday's trade deadline. What are your thoughts on the George Hill acquisition for the 76ers? And more importantly, what does he bring to the Sixers team?
Just looking at it from a perspective of George Hill, I mean, it's a great pickup. What he does, just first of all, lengthening the roster and expanding your depth when you're talking about a guy who is playoff tested at 34 years old. You know, he came into the league under Greg Popovich. He's played with LeBron. He's played with Giannis. He knows how to play on the ball. He could play off the ball. He shot it at an elite rate. He's incredibly efficient, one of the most efficient guards in the NBA. Doesn't turn the ball over. With the Thunder this year, he was averaging less than a turnover a game. I think it was 0.9 was the number. And that's like, I think for his career, he's like 1.2 per game. So when you could bring a guy like that to your team, to any team, I think he fits. Just because he's that good, he can really fit in anywhere. When you talk about this team, that is when the two superstars are on the young side. They're both turnover prone. That's a reality. For as great as they are, they both turn the ball over a lot. And to just have a guy like that, and I think too, what I love the most is it gives Doc Rivers kind of just another chess piece. When you talk about the postseason and 7-game series and how those play out and how big matchups are, at the end of a close game, to have a guy like George Hill that can come in and maybe give you some extra ball handling. If Danny Green is struggling from the field, if you want a guy who's going to give you more defense, maybe you put him in over Seth Curry to close out a game. Just to have that extra option, I think, is going to be huge. The price tag, you give up like 4 second-round picks was ultimately the price of it. But to get a guy like that when you're in a championship run and still keep all of your rotational players, I think is enormous. So I think it's a solid move. He's obviously not a savior. He's not Kyle Lowry, but he's a damn good player. And I think he's going to be a big boost.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I kind of just had, and by the way, my name's Scott, man. Nice to meet you, Paul.
Nice to meet you too, Scott.
Thanks, man. So my question is kind of just to follow up on the George Hill topic. You kind of mentioned what type of role he could play. On our show earlier this week, we had a huge confrontation in the comments between, Dylan in the comments and guys saying that they truly think that George Hill should probably start over Seth Curry. how do you feel about George Hill's role? Do you think that that's something that could happen? I personally think he should run the second unit. Doc's not really known to, switch up something that's working. How do you feel about that?
Well, right off the top, I think you hit it with, listen, the starting five has been great when they're all healthy and everything's intact. That starting five has played well. I love the spacing that Seth Curry provides. I understand some people, the idea of, Seth Curry's not a good defender. I mean, flat out. He's below average defender. He's an okay ball handler. He can run a pick and roll. I wouldn't want him running my offense. But that's probably why one of the reasons you prefer George Hill coming off the bench, as you mentioned as well, with running the second unit, taking some pressure off of Shake Milton, allowing him to kind of attack more and score and not have to worry about getting his teammates involved. George Hill could do that. I also think, too, starting games is not nearly as important as who closes games. Like I talked about before, when you can have a guy like George. Listen, if the starting five is rolling and everyone, if Seth Curry is shooting the lights out, if Danny Green's shooting well and playing good defense, you close with your starting five. If one of those guys is struggling, you roll with a George Hill, or even, or if Shake Milton gets rolled, you go with him, or if Matisse Thybulle's playing well, and you got a guy that he's really locking up, you go with him. So, and I think that's one of the things, listen, Doc Rivers isn't perfect. I don't love everything he does. I hate the all bench lineups. I'm such not a fan of it, but that's what he does. But I think what he does that Brett Brown didn't do is he doesn't feel like he has to go to his starters to close games out. If guys are playing well, he's going to close with them. And I think that's what you're going to see for the rest of this season. I think that's what you'll see in the postseason. George Hill is going to close some games. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's where you go. I think you keep the starting lineup intact. You see how the game plays out. You get a feel for, how the matchups are looking and how things are going. And based off that, that's how you determine who closes games. And I think that's the much more important thing.
Gotcha. It's kind of the answer that Dylan had.
I can't get the smile off my face.
Let me ask you about how George Hill, how does he affect Shake Milton specifically?
So, yeah, I think, I'm a big Shake Milton guy. I think this year from a creation standpoint, he's been very good. Obviously, the shot is just not been good. Everything kind of looks flat. Everything kind of looks short. For a guy who has shot the ball extremely well at an elite level, at every level he's been at, it's slightly discouraging. But at the same time, I have to think maybe this year it might be a little tough with only, I think there's like 26 games left. It might be tough for him to get it going. But I do think in his career, I think he will turn it around and he will get his shot back. But it has kind of, it struggled. He struggled with it. But I think from a creation standpoint, he's been very good. You've seen him get to the lane more than usually. Seen him kind of get to his spots. I think the added body weight and muscle has helped him there. I think what George Hill does is just, like I said before, just take so much pressure off him where he doesn't have to run the offense, doesn't have to run that second unit. And one thing I've noticed is dating back to last year, it seemed like the book was out on Shake that when he's running the point, pressure him full court because he might have a tendency to turn it over, or maybe he doesn't, it frustrates him. Maybe he doesn't get the team into its sets. So you're seeing that that's been the strategy this year is, all right, if we have a guard that can do it, let's pressure this guy up and down the court. And that takes a toll on a guy. When you're every single possession, someone's picking you up full court and you have to get the ball and get the team in the offense. That takes a lot out of you. So you're eliminating that with George Hill. George Hill gets the ball at the court. Teams would probably be a lot less prone to doing that. And even if they do, that still frees up Shake, I think. And I think the game will just be made a lot easier for Shake. And not only, I think him, he can learn from George Hill. George Hill is the kind of guy that, as I mentioned earlier too, he's just so efficient and just has a way of fitting and melding into whatever lineup he's playing in. And if a little bit of that can rub off on Shake, I think that can help him this year and then just throughout his career. And the Sixers still have him signed up for a couple more years. So it could just make him a better player for the length of his contract and for the time that he is a Sixer.
What's up, Paul? Seems like we have like 2 games until Joel Embiid comes back. How surprised are you that we've been able to maintain that number 1 position in the East without moving at all?
Pretty surprised. I have to give the team a lot of credit because we all saw it. It's been a disaster in recent years when he has been out of the lineup. even early this year, it was a disaster. It's almost a little bit, not to the degree because it was a ridiculous run, but that 17-game winning streak they went on in Ben Simmons' rookie year to close that season out. It reminds you a little bit of that and the fact that they are just playing very good basketball. Clearly, I think they're worn down a little bit. Long road trip, 6-game road trip is just unbelievable to think about, especially when 4 of those games are on the West Coast. That's brutal. So I am surprised, pleasantly surprised. I think this shows that the Sixers have had good players in the past. I think right now they are a good team. And when you get Joel Embiid back into that mix of them playing good basketball, I think it's only a positive. I think, the guys will acclimate. I think he'll acclimate. And it's the fact that everyone's playing so well is a huge thing. It's Ben Simmons is the guy they really need to get going a little bit. But other than that, Danny Green has been excellent since the break. I think Seth Curry's got a little bit more jump in his step, after the All-Star break and, the COVID situation he dealt with. I think his legs look better. And then again, you throw George Hill into that mix. And I just think this is a team that's, I don't know how far they'll go. I don't know what the expectations are, but it's been a pleasant surprise that they've been able to hang, especially with how ridiculous Brooklyn has played and how loaded they are. So it's been a pleasant surprise. And them getting Joel Embiid back, it's only going to help, obviously.
Yeah, so Paul just hit on our next 2 questions, but we're going to ask you anyway, Paul. Look, you hit on mine, this team without Joel Embiid, and, quite frankly, they look like a junior varsity squad earlier in the year without him, going 1-5 when he wasn't on the floor. And now they have a chance with a win over the Cavs to go 7-3 in the 10 games since his injury against Washington. What changed? Like, can you point, is it Doc? Is it, chemistry? What changed over the last 10 games to where they no longer look like a JV squad without him and they can actually, hold their own?
Doc is definitely a big part of it, I think. I think it's just this overall professionalism, chemistry, maturation, whatever you want to call it. It's just guys kind of stepping up to the plate and taking responsibility and kind of just, not feeling bad for themselves because they don't have Joel Embiid. Instead saying, all right, we have to win these games. Like, he's not going to play for a while. We got to win. We got to find a way. And they've done that. And I think it speaks volumes to the leadership. I touched on Danny Green. I think he's a huge part of that. This is a guy who's won. I think about this too. Like the last couple of years, they haven't had guys that have won championships on this team. They've had veterans. They've had guys with a lot of experience, but not a guy with 3 rings like Danny Green has. And I know some people want to hate on him and say, he's played with great players. He still won the rings, and he still played a part on all those teams. And I think that's a big thing. He knows cultures. He played for Greg Popovich. You know what I mean? He played for great organizations, so he understands what it takes to win. He knows what a winning culture looks like, and I think he has brought that here. I think that's a big part of why they're winning. And even Dwight Howard, I think he's been, up and down on the court, obviously, but I think as a leader off the court, I think he's been huge for them. And then just, getting back to Doc Rivers, and not just Doc Rivers, his entire staff. Yeah. Doc has assembled a phenomenal staff. And I think that's all it bled into, just this different culture, different chemistry, different maturity level. And I think that's been number one reason why they've really been able to win without Joel Embiid. And then also I got to give a lot of credit to Tobias Harris because, he's been having an all-star caliber season, obviously didn't make the team, but he's been at that level for most of the year. He's carried the offense for times even when Joel Embiid has been in the lineup at times. He's carried the team. He's been huge in the clutch in the fourth quarter. So I think all of that has led to it's a really good recipe to them winning games without Joel Embiid. And again, when they get him back, I imagine it's only going to get better.
Yeah, Toby carried them at the end of that Lakers game. He carried them in overtime against the Jazz, even with Joel on the floor. So I love that point, and I hope that this Tobias Harris can maintain the level of play when Joel's back.
For sure. I think one of the things we've seen that a couple of things. One, I think he's just he's improved in pretty much every capacity in his game. The quick decision making, Doc has made a big emphasis about that in training camp. And here we are. And I think that's been one of the biggest reasons. I see him finishing through contact more. I just see him using his body and his physicality to get to spots on the floor that maybe he didn't do as much in previous seasons. I think he's identified. Listen, you're kind of giving yourself away but it's clear he wants to go left and he wants to pull up and take that little mid-range shot. But listen, if he can get to his shot if he can get to that spot when he wants to get it, there's not much you can do, even if you know he's going to try to get there. And I think he's been just knowing himself as a player. And I loved, again, the finishing through contact. I thought that was one of his biggest issues against Boston last year in the playoffs. I thought he got some pretty good looks at the rim and he just couldn't make them. But you're seeing him, he's done it against, you saw him do it against Utah, against Rudy Gobert. You've seen him do it against you saw him do it against Jokic last night. I mean, he's done it against some good centers, some big physical players. And I think that's been enormous. I think he's been better as a passer and a playmaker. Some of the passes he's made, I don't think they're plays he made in past seasons. And then defense, I think he's been a much, much, much better defender this season than he's ever been. And I think that has just added to his level of play. And I think it's made the team better because he's definitely not a liability. And at times he's been above average on that end. And he supplies some versatility because he is 6'8", because he is strong, but he can also move his feet pretty well. So it's just, I really can't say enough about how good Tobias Harris has been and how much he has improved. And that's the one thing that you could always say about this guy. The dude works his butt off and he always comes back better. Last year was a bad year, and he'll tell you that. But he always comes back with an added element to his game and always comes back a little bit better. And you're seeing that this year.
Love it. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so I kind of just had a question. There's been a lot of talk about Ben Simmons, his performance. Blind eye, it does look like his aggressiveness has tamed down a bit since after the All-Star break. A lot of talk on Twitter. It seems like, once again, Sixers Twitter has completely flipped on Ben Simmons. Struggling with turnovers. How do you feel about Ben Simmons' play this season? Overall, and do you think with Joel Embiid coming back, that should kind of give him a boost as well with less responsibility?
It's funny because I don't think that Sixers Twitter has necessarily turned on Ben Simmons. I think it's that there is this faction that defends him to no end, and there's this faction that just wants to rip him apart. And when he's good, all the people that support him come out, and then when he's bad, all the people that attract him come out of the shadows. I think that's the way that kind of works with Ben Simmons. But yeah, I mean, he's been up and down this year, quite frankly. I mean, defensively, he's been outstanding. I think he should absolutely be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. But he's been up and down, and lately he's been flat out. He just hasn't been good recently. And he said it last night. He owned it. He said, I got to get my S together. He said it. And I think that level of responsibility should be an encouraging factor from that standpoint, because in the past, if someone asked him a question about, assessing that he hasn't been very good, he probably wouldn't have taken that question very well, but he owned it. He said, I have to get it together. The team has to get back on track. So I think that's a positive thing. I think the lineups have affected him. The Dwight Howard pairing with him has just been abysmal. Offensively, any good team is going to see those two together on the floor and know, all right, there are two defenders, just hang out in the paint, and then we'll just deny everybody else at the 3-point line, and boom, we're done. We'll shut it down. And I think it's a pretty easy strategy to implement if you have decent defenders and you are a decently coached team. It's pretty easy to make that work. So I think that's been a huge factor. It's just those lineups. I think in the playoffs, I could see Doc Rivers maybe wanting to really solely pair Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid together and not having Ben and Dwight on the floor together, because I think it's proven that it's not going to work. I think when you look at the line, this has been over the course of their careers, they are better together than they are apart. It's factual. They just really are. They are better together than they are apart. And I think that's, going forward when he comes back, I expect that when Joel Embiid does come back, I think Ben Simmons is going to play better because the team is just better when he's there. And, I think what kind of, and I'm not one of those people that says, oh, no, he's got to shoot. He's got to shoot no, like, I get it. I get the concern. I get that he could be so much better if he were to shoot and make shots. But I think what disappoints me is like a game like last night when they're getting blown out and they're getting their butts kicked. just maybe fire one, or just maybe try to be a little bit more aggressive and try to do some things that are maybe outside of your comfort zone, knowing that it's not a close game and your team kind of needs a jolt. Those are the kind of moments that kind of disappoint me. Like when they're rolling and they're playing well, I don't want to see him bombing threes or taking mid-range jump shots. I don't want to see that. But in situations where maybe they're not playing as well, I would maybe like to see him get out of his comfort zone and extend his range a little bit and see what he can do. But yeah, I think once Joel Embiid comes back, they're gonna be just fine. I think he's gonna get better. I kind of think, and I'll eat my words if it happens, but I could see Thursday kind of being a statement game for Ben Simmons. He already talked about last night to us that Cleveland's a team that's had their number. He called out himself again last night, so I have a hunch that we might see kind of a statement game from him Thursday night. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and you guys can call me out on it. It's fine. But I just a feeling that he's gonna show out on Thursday night.
So I got to cut in here because there's a commenter who was on my nerves on Monday, and he's back in here. Paul, can you just answer this simple question for me? Can Ben Simmons be a point guard on a championship caliber team?
Yes, I mean he's got to prove it, but
No,
I think yes.
Okay.
This is going to sound kind of hypocritical of what I just said, but I do feel this way. I think Ben Simmons has to make certain adjustments because of Joel Embiid. Rightfully so, because Joel Embiid is great. If he didn't get hurt, I think he would have been the MVP of this league. So, but I think you see sometimes with smaller lineups how good Ben Simmons can be. I do think he can, but I mean, to answer your question bluntly, yes, I do think he can be a point guard on a championship team. I do think there are other elements that need to be better. Can this team, this starting five, can it win a championship? I don't know. I really don't. And also too, like, I think we can get obsessed with this idea of positions and all that. Like Giannis sometimes is a point guard. LeBron James sometimes is a point guard. It's not, but like I think it's possession to possession. It's set to set. It's lineup to lineup. So I think we sometimes get obsessed with the idea of, oh, he's a point guard, or oh, he's not a point guard. I think he can be a point guard sometimes. I think sometimes he's better utilized as a screener and a roller. I think it depends on the situation, the matchup, the players, and all of that. So I think, yes, he can be, but also I think we're kind of pigeonholing him by saying he's just one thing.
Sure.
Let's fast forward to the playoffs real quick, because obviously we're going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of where we are, who we're going to play, this, that. So let's get into the rotation. Obviously, you're going to have the starting five. It's there. We presume George Hill's going to log some minutes. Shake Milton will log some minutes. Dwight Howard, you hope to get spot minutes out of. But then after that, you'd have to think, like, Matisse is going to see minutes as well. That means you're already at 9 guys. Do you see anyone in the buyout? Do you think Korkmaz still contributes a couple minutes? Mike Scott? Where do you think they'll go?
So I think at most it'll be 9 guys. I can't imagine him going. I mean, I guess theoretically he could, but I don't see him going 10 guys. And I think Doc has even alluded to that. Excuse me. You want to be at 9 guys during the playoffs at most. A lot of teams cut it to 8. The Sixers a couple years ago had it at 7, basically. It didn't work out too well for them, but yeah. So I think kind of the way you laid it out is pretty much what I see. George Hill and Shake Milton, I believe, 100% they will be off the bench. They will be guys that'll come in and play, kind of be their 6th and 7th guy. Dwight Howard, I think Doc wants to play him. I think that's going to be the initial plan, is he'll want to get him minutes. We'll see how it goes. Matchups, again, I think is going to be so huge, because if a team runs out a smaller 5, that could give them problems. That could present issues. And then Matisse, I think because he's so good defensively, you're going to see him play. I think he has to play, because I think, especially if you get to the Brooklyn Nets and you got to play them in a series, you have to play Matisse side, because you're going to need his perimeter defense. Excuse me. As far as the buyout market goes, I thought it was interesting that Mark Stein reported that they were in on Gorgui Dieng, because that's clearly a stretch 5 that I think could have helped them. And I guess my question at that point would be, well, were they looking at him as a 3rd string center? Were they looking at him as well, we'll go matchup depending on, him and Dwight Howard, depending on what we see. Because that's when we look back to what the Lakers did, that's kind of what they did. Depending on the matchup, they either rolled with Dwight or they rolled with, they put Anthony Davis at the 5 and rolled with a smaller lineup at times, which that smaller lineup, I think, was the key to them beating the Heat, really. So it says to me that they might not be done, that there might be a guy that could interest them on the buyout market if another guy does become available. I kind of like the idea, and Daryl Morey said this. He said that, he will take the best guy. He's not just going to take a position, so we won't just take a big. I think it's something like, listen, I have no knowledge of this. I don't know if it's going to happen. Or the Orlando Magic have already said they're not going to buy him out. But if like a guy like Otto Porter Jr. gets bought out, imagine him playing that Mike Scott role with Ben Simmons at the 5. That could work. I mean, that kind of lineup, I think, in a playoff series for 10 minutes could work. So I would say that they are not, Daryl Morey's not going to sit. If he sees something he likes, he's going to be interested in it. He's going to attack. So I wouldn't say this roster is 100% set in stone, but I think the rotation, I think it is going to kind of play out sort of how you said it will. Dwight Howard's going to be the big question mark to me. Is Doc going to stick with him with smaller guys? Is he going to play with Ben Simmons? Are they going to go small at times? Are they going to pick up? I think there are some questions at that spot, if there are any.
So if they do go small and they don't make a move and grab someone else, is it Mike Scott at the 5, or would you run a lineup saying like Tobias Harris plays some 5, Ben Simmons? Because like obviously you throw those two back and forth in that type of lineup. But if they don't make another move, like I'm sorry, but I'm ready for the Hive to be retired and moved on from at that small ball 5 position.
Yeah, I mean, I've defended Mike Scott a lot, but he's just hasn't been good. He's been hurting him, and I personally would like to see more of the Ben Simmons at the 5 look. It's not something I want to live in, but for 5 to 10 minutes a night, I wouldn't hate it, especially if you're just go full on shooters. Put Tobias at the 4 and then go like, I don't know, Seth, Danny Green, George Hill, or Shake and George Hill, like any combination that's basically Ben and 4 shooters. I think you might have something there. And especially if a team goes small against you, you can kind of just be like a super switchable group as well. So that would be what would interest me most, would be if they don't do any other moves, if they stay where they are, having Ben Simmons maybe, go to that small ball 5 in certain lineups and just surrounding him with shooting. That would intrigue me the most out of all the scenarios.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, so is there anybody specific that you're looking out for the buyout period? Like anyone that really catches your eye? Anyone that you want specifically on the team?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, Otto Porter Jr. would be a guy, if Orlando would do it, I think he'd be an exceptional fit. I mean, when he's healthy, he's an elite 3-point shooter, versatile defender, kind of a combo forward. He'll play the 3 or the 4. Smart guy, veteran guy. He's a guy I would be all over if that were to occur. Some of the lower names here, I mean, everyone talks about the idea of the stretch 5, and I get that, but I think all the stretch 5s, they didn't want to come here because of certain like you weren't going to get LaMarcus Aldridge because you couldn't give him a big enough role. Same with Dieng, I think, wanted a bigger role on a playoff team. He's going to be a free agent and he's going to be 31 years old. He wants to show out and he wants to make a little money next year. So it would have been, I appreciate that Daryl Morey tried, but I think he didn't see a clear path to minutes here. And that's why he chose. So I don't know which kind of stretch 5 would make sense. If the Thunder wind up buying out Mike Muscala, sure. I mean, I'd sniff around that. You could do worse. I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't want to ride him for too long, but for, again, a couple minutes a night, possibly. And one sneaky name that I kind of would like that I wouldn't hate is if the Houston Rockets buy out Avery Bradley. I know some people have talked about Olynyk, but I think they're going to keep Olynyk just because I think he's giving them a little juice. And I think, I think they want to keep Steven Silas sane for the rest of the season because what that poor guy has been through this season. So, but if they buy out Avery Bradley, I wouldn't make him part of the regular rotation, but as an insurance policy, again, when you get to a team like the Brooklyn Nets and what they're throwing at you with that firepower, guys are going to get in foul trouble. What if someone gets hurt? To have a veteran guy like Bradley who can come in and guard Kyrie Irving for a few minutes, I think would be huge, or even James Harden. and he shot the ball. He's been up and down throughout his career, but when he's healthy, he shot the ball well. So someone like that, and Avery Bradley, you waive somebody. There's, I'm sure, a lower end on the roster guy you can waive to make room for him. So that would be a guy that would interest me a little bit. Those would probably be the two biggest things. Would be Otto Porter Jr. and Avery Bradley, if that winds up happening.
I'm sorry, Paul. I just have to bring this up for you and give you a little feel of what I have to deal with on the show every day.
Listen, man, I hear it. I get it on Twitter all the time, brother. So fire away.
Paul, before we get you out of here, I just want to get your thoughts on what is the ceiling for this team this year, in your opinion. Like, what's a success and what's a failure for this team come playoff time?
So I'm not sure it's that black and white. I think there's definitely some gray area there. Okay. And, this team is as good as I think they can make the NBA finals. I think they are good enough to do that. Now, if you're making me place a bet on who I think is coming out right now, I'm saying the Brooklyn Nets, just because of those three superstars and that firepower. And I don't know how you match it if you're the Sixers. But do I think they could make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and give Brooklyn a tough series? Absolutely. And things change, things happen between now and so who knows what it'll look like. But yeah, I think the ceiling of this team is absolutely a team that can make the finals. I think if they get bounced in the second round, that would certainly be a disappointment. That would be a huge disappointment to me. I think if they make the Eastern Conference Finals and give the Brooklyn Nets or whomever, if it's not the Brooklyn Nets, if it happens to be the Milwaukee Bucks, if they give that team a tough series, then certainly it would be a disappointment to a degree, but at the same time, it's a lot of positive vibes, especially considering where this season started. And I feel like we all sort of had middling expectations. I mean, I thought they'd be like a 4 seed, get to the second round. Maybe I thought that was kind of their ceiling. So to me, the expectations have changed because they've been so good. So if they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals, put up a fight, that to me is a pretty successful season. And then going into the offseason, you have some flexibility. You can make some moves. Daryl Morey gets a full offseason to kind of evaluate things and tinker with the roster. So I would feel very optimistic for the next season if that's the case.
One more. I'm sorry. If it is a disappointment, like the second round exit or an upset in the second round, does Daryl Morey pull the trigger on breaking up like anything with this team?
I think it would depend on what's out there. And it's also going to depend on what it looks like. If Ben Simmons plays great and they still lose, you're probably not going to be in a hurry to move Ben Simmons. If Tobias Harris struggles, would you maybe look to get out of his contract? Perhaps. And it's going to depend on who's out there. Like, does Bradley Beal change his mind? Or do the Wizards come to him and say, "Hey, man, we need to blow this thing up. Like, it's not going to work out." It doesn't appear that it's headed there, but if it does, that's going to change the way you're looking at things. And we also, things change so rapidly in the NBA. Like if someone told you going into this trade deadline that you would be possibly trading for Kyle Lowry, you would have laughed in their face. No way you would have thought that the Toronto Raptors were going to trade Kyle Lowry. Things move fast in this league, so you never know what's going to happen, what the offseason is going to bring. And so if it brings a big name out there that could make sense, and it would make sense to perhaps move on from a big name here, Daryl Morey, I think would absolutely explore it. And if it's something that he thinks is going to, increase that championship possibility, that championship window, I think he's not going to be afraid to pull the trigger.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, go give him a follow on Twitter at Paul Hudrick if you haven't already. You can find his work on 97.3 ESPN, or check out his podcast, Coming In for a Landing Pod. Again, Paul, thank you so much, and go Sixers, and can't wait to get the big fella back.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I appreciate having me on.
Thanks. All right, boys, before we wrap up today's show, just quick thoughts on anything that stuck out to you with Paul's comments and answers. And then, we'll go from there. Love the end today, boys.
I think honestly, man, once again, he kept it real. We're in a stage where, we have people so upset with the Sixers right now after two, bad losses against the Clippers and the Nuggets. And, people are acting irrational, Ben Simmons and blowing it up. And it's as quick as Ben Simmons having that breakout game against the Cavs on Thursday, and then everything's back to normal, everything's golden, the Sixers can win the championship again. It's a reactionary league. That's what it comes down to, and that's kind of what he was getting at the end there, is that there's a bit of uncertainty with the future depending on what happens during this postseason. So I just thought he kept it real. He really answered all the questions very direct, and we got some good information from him.
Yeah, Paul's always a great guest and awesome guy. So please, everyone, go give him a follow on Twitter. Again, if you don't already. Again, I know you'll love this one. Trust the process. And on that note, we will wrap up today's Daily Dose. Thank you guys so much
Lose on purpose.
and commenting along with us. I believe we'll be back tomorrow, but it'll be a different time show because the Phillies opening day is at 3 o'clock, right? 3:05?
3:05.
3:05 first pitch. So for myself, for Scotty, for Gint, for George, thank you guys so much for watching. And come hang out with me and Mike Small at TPL, wherever you're watching right now, in about 10 minutes or so, as the premiere of Spitballin' gets back on track today, 4:30, 4:35, covering all Phillies topics. So go check that out. And have a nice night, everyone.